Okay, so just to let you know what this is, doing something very slightly different this week. I have my voice, my fingers, this piano, but I also have the voices of a number of people, voices and other things. At the minute we have a piece called Sound Piece by William Burroughs. That one in there. It's pretty nutty. What this is today is the
another new one now.
Oh no, and then there's Neil Young.
Everybody having
looking
a good
at
time?
some BBC concert in 1971. This is the 32nd Longcat Weekly Improvisation. And I'm going to bring in these other voices from time to time. I have, for your delectation, the voice of Daniel Pinchbeck. I have the voice of Hakim Bey. I have the voice of Neil Young. I have the voice of Archie Shepp. I have the voice of William Burroughs. I don't know if I'm going to use them all. I just got them there just to check it out, really. Experimental little direction for the Longcat Weekly Improvisations.
Like Avalokiteshvara, the Tibetan Buddha of compassion, Quetzalcoatl is an archetypal god form that occasionally takes human rebirth to accomplish a specific mission. As foretold, I am also the Zadik, the righteous one, and the gatherer of the sparks of the Kabbalah, as well as the once and future king promised by Arthurian legend. I do not let anything interrupt me in my quest for truth.
I do not let anything interrupt me in my quest for truth.
Only when nature doesn't take its natural toll am I worried with the human soul. Some people think that they are in their rights when on command they take a black man's life. Let me give a rundown on how I feel. If it ain't natural, then it ain't real.
If it ain't natural, then it ain't real. If it ain't natural, then it ain't real. Archie Shepp. Daniel Pinchbeck, whose book I'm currently reading. William Burroughs, who is speaking, but he's also cutting up, messing around with his own voice. Hakim Bey.
Their means of rebellion were not ours.
Their means of rebellion were not
Vocabulary was not ours. Perhaps even their ideas were not ours. And yet there's some link. It has to be. We have to admit that there's some link. And certainly Blake and the rebels of his time, or the rebels of 1640, or even the heretics of the Middle Ages, and I'll get into some of these groups later, would have certainly felt that way. Okay, I don't want to get hung up too much on any one of these points.
He doesn't want to get hung up.
I say that Christianity, which should originally be considered a radical Gnostic cult, kingdom of heaven within you, okay, a very radical notion indeed,
Very radical.
now functions badly as state religion, has severe contradictions, and gives rise to schizoculture. Why? Because there is that liberatory kernel within Christianity that's constantly concreted over by one church after another, and yet still, like those, mushrooms and weeds that Thoreau spoke about that would break through the sidewalk of the end of civilization and grow despite the paving of the whole world, so to speak. Those seeds are still there, remain there, and every time one pops up, there's a schizophrenic reaction on the part of the church, whatever that church might be. Just as there's a schizophrenic reaction whenever any sincere believer who thinks that they're in it for the liberation suddenly realizes that that's not what it's about at all. It's about, keeping the pockets of the Pope lined or whatever. So these kind of contradictions become very sharp and very tragic in the Christian context, I think, maybe even more so than in other religions. But all religion is rooted in basic contradiction. The old Stone Age spiritual content, plastered over with Middle Age ideology of hegemonic separation. Religion constantly attempts to overcome or rectify this contradiction. I mean, there's always this eternal idea that I spoke of, this eternal rediscovery of the idea of liberation also happens, in fact, frequently happens within religious circles. You start doing a little meditation, you start getting in touch with yourself, pretty soon you're in trouble with the priests. You're in trouble with the Pope. You're being burned at the stake as a heretic.
You are being burnt at the stake as a heretic. I don't know, this, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do it like this. It's a strange old business. I kind of want to listen what Mr. Hakim Bey is saying there.
Mr. Martin, how did all this start? How did you get here in the first place? If you found conditions so distasteful here on planet Earth, why did you stay? Good questions, I mean good questions, young man. Obviously, I am not omnipotent. My arrival here was an accident, a wreck. Ship came apart like a rotten undervest. The accident in which I lost my sight. I was the only survivor. The other members of the crew, well, you understand, sooner or later. So I decided to act sooner. And I have acted sooner ever since. If a man makes a certain amount of money by certain means, he will go on making more money by the same means, and so forth. Human activities are drearily predictable. It should now be obvious that what you call a reality is a function of these precisely predictable because pre-recorded human activities. Now, what could louse up a pre-recorded biologic film? Obviously, random factors. That is, someone cutting my word and image lines at a random. Mr. Martin, what sort of place did you people come from? What sort of place did we come from? If you want the answer to that question, just look around, Buster. Just look around. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard an interview with Mr. Martin, sole survivor of the first attempt to send up a space capsule. Now you see me, now you don't. Mr. Martin has been called the man of 1,000 lies. Well, he didn't have time for 1,000, but I think he did pretty well in the time allotted.
Is it just the sound of it? That was kind of spectacular. Is it just the sound of it? Do I want the meaning also? Do I want the meaning? 'Cause these people are speaking a language. Or do I just want the sound of their words? That really go just without any of them, just me? Just say, right, look, Robbie Knight, here is a note, sing this note, play this chord. Doesn't matter if they don't meet in the middle, does not matter, don't try and change it, just do it. I don't know, that's a pretty scary place to be. Easier just to lay down the carpet like this. Say, this is our little harmonic world, you play where you like within this. Well, I've never been one to do things like that. And my words may be just not as true. Maybe they're just words. Maybe they contain truth. Maybe they contain truth. Maybe it's just sound. So just how brave am I? If I was that brave, I would have stuck with the sound.
Possibly we need to consider the exigency of a rough morality, and perhaps even some sort of meaning, however inexpressible or even spiritual. In other words, should we dare to consider this study, this research into spiritual anarchism as possibly being at least one source for an emergent solution to this tragedy that we perceive, this tragedy which has led all ideology into this dustbin of history and this stink hole of pollution, space-time pollution that we call the 21st century. Point 9. Now, with the collapse of the social in 1989 to 91, the collapse of the movement of the social, and the triumph of global capital, we shattered remnants. What could we do? Well, we could put on happy faces and say that globalism is just the new internationalism, the final stage of capital, and that soon the means of production will fall finally and rightly into the final hands of a finally enlightened global final proletariat. Or we could gloomily admit that the totality has engulfed us, that history is dead, that alienation is universal, that the last enclosures have been carried out, that the logic of technology and money combined ends with the elimination of the human, with Paul Virilio's time-space pollution, the big accident, the global accident. Or we could go on refusing to accept that dichotomy, either meaning or non-meaning. We could refuse. We could go on demanding the impossible, which has become really a slogan of anarchism in recent decades. But what would the impossible be if not a kind of spirituality? I mean, it's not physically there because it's impossible. It's perhaps not even mentally there because it's impossible. So where could it be if not in the spirit? Using that term as loosely as possible, and perhaps even in the French sense of esprit. If religion and ideology both have betrayed us, perhaps we need some sort of a new paradigm, which would be neither religion nor ideology. But every new worldview has ancestors. There's nothing new under the sun, as the prophet saith. Postmodernism doesn't necessarily mean simply sifting through the rubbish of history to construct more revolutionary commodities and attitudes. Let's say we want to try to imagine a non-authoritarian green movement based on Proudhonian anarcho-federalism and Kropotkinite mutual aid. Basic plumb-line anarchist stuff. But rooted in some form of spirituality. Where could we look for inspiration? Do we have a tradition? Now I'm just going to slough over the whole problem of whether I'm right or wrong, and say, let's suppose that we're interested. We want to know more. We want to know if there really is a spiritual tradition of anarcho-something or other, of non-authoritarian mysticism, something like that. Is there a genealogy, point 10, is there such a thing as a genealogy of resistance, a golden chain of transmission, as the Sufis used to say, which passes on the Stone Age autonomous spirit from age to age, whether literally from breast to breast, as the Sufis say, from person to person, or through the recreation in the imaginal, at the imaginal level, amongst new generations of humans. Since we've mentioned medieval Europe, let's start there. Unfortunately, then we'll have to ignore the classical era, the Orient, to ignore Taoism, Sufism, Shiite extremism, radical Kabbalah, Sabbatai Zvi and Jakob Frank, the great pseudo-messiahs of radical Judaism. We'll ignore Hinduism, especially Tantra, radical syncretists like Kabir, the Bengali terrorist party, which my own Tantric guru, had the honor to belong to, as he told me.
I would rather be a plant on this planet. Only when nature doesn't take its natural toll am I worried for the human soul.
Only when nature does not take its natural toll do I worry for the human soul. Well, I guess this sees me drawing the 30-second improvisation to a close. strange little journey. I don't know what I think about all these voices. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe we see what it came about because I got given tape recording on a cassette of William Burroughs reading from Junkie. For Christmas, I was considering using that, and well, watch this space. We'll see if this goes anywhere. Thank you.